Last week, I was hosting a story clinic in my online community and talking about the idea of storytelling as a form of mind control. This isn't an idea that I came up with on my own. I first heard it from author Dean Wesley Smith. I don't know if he came up with it himself or he heard it from someone else himself, but the whole idea is when you are telling a story, you really know that you are getting into it when you can make the other person see what you want them to see, hear what you want them to hear, feel what you want them to feel, and think what you want them to think. This is one of the reasons why story is not only one of the most powerful ways to convey information, but it is also one of the sharpest tools that we have for trying to persuade other people. And I thought about this recently, so we talked about it during the story clinic that we had last week, but it's something that's been on my mind more recently when I was thinking about what is it that makes somebody maternal or paternal? How does that express itself in people? And it reminded me of a story that I used to tell about my freshman year, my first year at college. Welcome to the INRIS Files, thoughts on pop culture, history, and the human condition from a very specific Generation X point of view. By the way, if you'd like to engage with these topics that I talk about here, you can do so at my free community. Just go to somethinginconspicuous.com. Yes, it's true. I named my online community Something Inconspicuous. I'm sure if you've seen any of my other videos, that really doesn't shock you. Anyway, it came up in conversation recently, the fact that I've always had certain paternal qualities. I've always known that I was going to have kids, or I should say, I've always believed that I was going to have kids. I have no idea really when this idea first planted itself in my brain. And I didn't notice until a few years after I first saw these maternal instincts in a woman that I had met my first year at university. But I've always imbued, or always maybe since my adolescence, imbued these sort of paternal instincts that weren't immediately obvious to me because they weren't the sort of stern father figure type thing, but more the relaxed, the casual father figure, the person who gently guides the people around them to do the right thing, to make good choices, but otherwise allows them to make their choices. There's different ways of expressing maternal instincts as well, but one of them frequently has to do with a sort of a nurturing aspect. And my first year in college, I saw this expressed during a late night work session. Now, I was living in the student dormitories, and I had a roommate. I also had a computer. As I'm recording this, everybody has computers. Everybody has computers. Everybody is carrying a computer in their pocket that is more powerful than any laptop or desktop computer was back when I was attending school. We call them phones, but but they really are very powerful computers. And back in the day, though, computers were a lot more expensive, a lot more rudimentary, and not everybody was fortunate enough to have one to bring with them when they went to college. Colleges would typically have computer labs where if you needed to write up a paper and you didn't have a typewriter, you could type it into a word processor on a computer at the computer lab and then print it up on one of their dot matrix printers. And Here's the thing. I grew up very, very blue collar, working class. I would even say kind of on the poorer side of the working class uh, in the inner city. We didn't have a lot, but when I was graduating from high school, a whole bunch of family members. I was the oldest of my generation of my cousins, and my grandparents, my parents, my other set of grandparents. Everybody had pulled together this money to buy me a used Macintosh computer. Now, these were actually called Macs. In fact, as opposed to, PowerBook or any of that distinction. There was one kind of Macintosh. It was the Macintosh. They actually got me a very special Macintosh. Now it was used, which is the only way they could afford it, but it had, if I remember correctly, it had 512K of RAM, 512 kilobytes of RAM. It was what they called a fat Mac. I think the original Mac only had 128, but this one had 512, and it had two slots where you could stick in a removable floppy disk. I don't even remember how much those held. 400K of information. I don't even know if any of this means anything to you. They were files that were far, far smaller than the files we take for granted today. And so I had this computer. Not a lot of people had a computer. My roommate did not have a computer. So I was more than happy to let him borrow my computer if he needed to work on a paper or whatever. And if he had to work late into the night, that didn't really bother me. I tended to be a night owl myself at the time. But I also, when I had to sleep, I would just go to sleep, and it wasn't a big deal. The computer was around the corner from my bed, so you could have the light on over the desk without that light shining in your eyes, or at least shining in my eyes when I was in my bed. Nonetheless, there was an occasion where I had a paper that was due the next day, and this was my modus operandi. If I had a paper that was due in a week, I might do the prep work in a reasonable fashion. Oh, your assignment is write a 3-page paper about this 5-page article from this magazine. We had these freshman writing seminars where the whole purpose was you could take one of these classes on any number of topics. The point wasn't the topic. The point was the topic should be something that interested you. The focus was on the writing itself. And this particular thing, I don't remember what the topic was. I think it was writing persuasive essays or something like that. But I had a magazine article to read, and I read it. But I didn't actually ever start writing until the night before it was due. I didn't yet realize this was going to be a pattern for the rest of my college life. At the time, I thought I was just too busy with so many other things, and I was always addressing things at the last possible minute because there were so many other things I wanted to do first. This is just the nature of how my brain worked, and I didn't realize at the time that this is actually a fairly common phenomenon among some people, whereas other people have no problem at all working on things methodically in the allotted time so that they're never in a rush by the time they get to the deadline. So it's late at night. I don't know. Maybe it's after 11 p.m. and my roommate is like, "Dude, I got to get some sleep. And could you do your work in the lounge?" Each of the floors in our dormitory had a central big room that was a lounge. Some of them might have had televisions. I can't remember if ours did, but if ours had a television, we never used it. We never had it on. I don't even think we had one. But it was well appointed with big sturdy couches and big sturdy chairs, and there were a couple of desks where you could set your writing implements or your computer or whatever and do your work. So I figured I would do the writing, and then when I was done, I would go to bed. I would wake up early, print it up on my print up the report on my printer, and then go to class. This was one of those early morning classes. I think it started at 9:05 in the morning, and I had a hard time with 9:05 classes, but sometimes that's just the way your schedule worked out. So I started moving all of my stuff out of our room and walk out into the hallway of the block of rooms where my room was, and then up the stairs to the common area. Each floor, by the way, split off into an upstairs and a downstairs on either end, and then you had your central floor. It's just the way the building was set up. And we were in one of the lower suites. So I carry up my notebook and the magazine and the pens and paper and whatever for note taking. And now it's time to bring up the computer. The computer is kind of a heavy beast. We don't. You may never have even seen one, but they were essentially this big rectangles, big boxes, very boxy, with a little 9-inch diagonal cathode ray tube in it that was monochrome. So this computer was essentially a black and white screen, but it was the first personal computer that had a graphic interface, which is kind of cool. And it had a handle in the top. So you would reach down and grab the handle and then lift it up. And then it was kind of heavy, not super heavy. Well, now our block of rooms, there was an emergency door, and the emergency doors, the fire doors, had springs on the hinges so that they wanted to stay shut. If you opened it and you wanted it to stay open, you would have to prop it open. So, well, it's easy enough when I'm carrying my notebook and my magazine and all that. Well, you just push the door open, go up, come down, open the door again. But in order to be polite to my roommate, instead of traipsing up and down for each of these things, I decided to use the end of the hallway as a staging area where the fire door was. So I brought everything out of our room into where the fire door was, so that as soon as possible I could close the door. I was trying to be a good roommate. We never did end up becoming the best of friends. It's kind of funny how things work out. We also didn't sabotage each other too much, maybe, but we didn't actively hate each other. At least we had that going for us. But nonetheless, I didn't want to antagonize my roommate at this point. So I had everything staged. I brought up all the lighter stuff, and now it's time to bring up the computer. Now, I had gotten a little, I'd gotten something that was heavy enough that I had set against the door to hold the fire door open while I was carrying things up. But then when I was getting the computer, I put my hand up on the door frame while I lean over to pick up the computer. I pick up the computer, and something happened that had loosened whatever it was that was holding open the door. So I'm leaning over, I'm picking up the computer, and the door is closing while I have my hand, actually it was my left hand, I had my hand up on the door frame, and my fingers were just curved around the wood enough, or the metal of the frame enough, to where one of my fingers, the longest one, oddly enough, was right where the door was gonna close on it. And this was a big, heavy door. I didn't even register what had happened until after it happened. The door had closed, and my hand that had been on the door frame was all of a sudden behind me without me registering anything right away other than my hand had just completely moved behind me. My arm had, of its own volition, swung behind me, and I noticed this little trail of little drops of red, kind of going down in an arc from where the door frame was, and across the door, and down to where my hand was. And then I look at it, and by the way, I mean, it was not a terribly gory sight, but there was red welling up around the tip of my finger, and dripping. It was just dripping, little bit of red, and and that was when it started to hurt. That was when it felt like there was a vice that had been attached to my finger, and it was just pinching really, really hard. Right by this emergency fire door was the door to our common bathroom. So we had the shower, we had like two showers, we had two sinks, and then there was a toilet down at the other end with its own barrier, and or its own wall kind of thing. Well, I rush to the one of the sinks, and I start running cold water so that I can see what the damage is, and also because I know that if you have any sort of a cut or a wound, you wanna flush out whatever germs, whatever dirt and grime and nastiness might already have been on your finger, or might have been on whatever it was that caused the wound. So I'm running my finger under the faucet, and I'm kind of looking at my finger, and I'm turning my hand this way and that under the water, and the water is carrying away the red that has started to gunk up right around the tip. And I notice that it looks like just the top portion of my finger, right above where the bone ends, was kind of just flopping around there. It was held on by a little bit of skin. And this is one of those things where, as I'm describing it, it might sound kind of like ew, but when you're in it, when you're there, and you're running the water to try to cool off your hand, and also to flush out the wound, uh, it's more fascinating than anything else. It's like, that's not supposed to look like that, and it still feels like there's a vice on it, even though there's nothing on it right now. And then I realize this cut is severe enough to where I really should have somebody look at it. This is not something that a band-aid might necessarily fix. But I don't know. It's after 11 p.m. I don't remember how late it was, but it was sometime after normal people would have gone to sleep. And student health is way across campus, and they're closed now anyway. I'm gonna have to go to the nearby uh, community hospital, the Tompkins County Community Hospital. So I happen to know where it was, and I don't even know how I happen to know where it was. This is before we had maps on our phones that with GPS devices, and you could say, "Take me to the urgent care," and then it would plot out a route for you, and then it would give you directions while you're driving there. None of that. What we did have was paper maps and our own memory and our own sense of direction. I did not have a great sense of direction, but somehow I knew where the community hospital was, and I don't remember why. At the time, we didn't use the term primary care or urgent care. It was emergency room or hospital, sometimes clinic. But how am I going to get there? Because every time I start to walk away from the sink, the blood starts welling up again. So I go back to the sink and I rinse it again, and then as I'm starting to leave, it's welling up again. I can't even get away long enough to like go find some gauze or bandages or something to kind of hold things together. Um, so I continue to rinse it until it's slowed down a little bit, and then I kind of rush right out to where the heavy door is, and I push open the heavy door while I'm trying to cup one hand under my finger that's been injured, and I call up, "Anybody in the lounge?" And then I rush right back to where the sink is because the blood is kind of welling up pretty quickly, and I'm rinsing it under the cold water, and then I heard somebody coming down, and it was one of the women from the other side of the floor, because we had each suite was would have either boys or girls, but the floor itself had both, right? So anyway, women were for our floor on the opposite side, and and one of them, for the sake of the story, we'll call her Cindy. Cindy comes in, and she says, "Do you need something? Is there something wrong?" She didn't even like come in, come in. She just sort of pulled open the door and said, "Does somebody need something?" And I said, "Yeah, Cindy, come in here." And so she comes into the bathroom where I'm running my hand under the sink. She can't really see much. There's no way she could have seen much, but she could see enough that there was a little bit of red mingling with the flow of the otherwise clear water coming from the sink. And she's like, "Huh, you seem to have a little bit of an issue there." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I do." And she said, "Okay, we need to get you to TC3 because or whatever it was called. For some reason, I remember it being TC3, but maybe it was TCH, whatever. Tompkins County Community something. Uh, we need to get you to the ER." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's probably a good idea." She said, "I don't have a car. Do you have a car?" And And as it so happened, I did. This is one of the wild things about my experience at this school. At this school, almost everybody else came from families that had a lot more money than my family. And yet, even so, I had a car. Now, it was a car that was 2 years older than I was. And a friend of mine called it the Blue Bomber because of something he had seen in a commercial where somebody refers to their car as the Blue Bomber. It was old and boxy, and it was one of those cars that this is before the days of computer chips controlling everything. If you needed something to you needed to work on the car, you worked on the car. Or at least I did, because we didn't have a lot of money to take it into the shop. And my father was a genius when it came to how machines worked. So he was able to guide me in terms of, oh yeah, it's a radiator. We'll go to the parts store, we'll buy the radiator, we'll blah blah blah. So I knew about repairing cars, and I had this beat up old car that could get me where I needed to go. Meanwhile, a lot of these other kids, even though they came from houses that had a lot more money, most of them didn't bring a car with them to the school. I kind of had to, because I couldn't really afford a lot of the transportation options that they were able to take advantage of. Um, so here we were. I happened to have a car because I was so poor. and and she's like, okay, well, are you okay with me driving your car? And I'm like, yeah. Now, as we're having this conversation, I'm starting to feel just the tiniest bit lightheaded. And and I probably mentioned that to her because she said, "Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to be the one who's driving." And so, let me go get some gauze or something for you to hold around your finger. Go get your keys. Go get your shoes on, and we'll go. So she went and she got ready to go, and then eventually she came back with gauze, and then I went. I got my keys and I got my shoes. It was fun putting my shoes on while trying to maneuver around the one hand. And then we go to my car, and then she drives my car, and I told her how to get there. It's a good thing I knew how to get there. It's also funny. I know now what I didn't know then, and that is, if you are in a compromised state, you have, depending upon how compromised you are, you have somebody else drive you, or you get an ambulance. Because if you were to pass out while the other person's driving, they can't take care of you. If you're an ambulance, the people in the ambulance, there'll be somebody riding in back with you, and they can take care of you while the driver is driving. So, little tip there. This was something that wasn't known to me at the time, but anyway, she got me to the hospital, and and all the while she's saying, "Okay, are you doing okay? Yeah, I'm doing okay. All right, make sure you're holding your hand up above your head. You want your hand just above your head. You definitely got to keep it up above your heart." I don't know how she knew this or what, but she was just very matter of fact about the whole thing, very calm and directed. She would check in with me, and meanwhile, of course, we're talking about how to get there and all the rest of that. And then we were talking about stuff, talking about our classes, talking about the other people on our floor, and oh yeah, what do you think about that Daryl guy, that whatever. And then we get there. She kind of walks with me in and making sure that I'm steady and all that. End up seeing a guy. Now, yeah, I was feeling a little lightheaded, and I don't think it was because I was losing blood. I think I was lightheaded because of shock. In fact, she even said as much. Um, as I tell the story, I have to assume she took some sort of CPR, or she got a first aid merit badge in the Girl Scouts or something, because she knew a little bit about making sure that I arrived in good condition. But I don't think I was lightheaded because I was losing too much blood. I think I was lightheaded just because of the shock. And she had said as much. Now, we see a guy, and then the guy cleans it all up, and then he's like, "Well, I don't know if we're going to need stitches. We might not." But when the whatever the word is for the doctor who's on call, once he's able to look at you, he'll take a look at you. Is the term attending, or I don't know. But the guy who was tending to me was the kind of a nurse. And then the doctor looks at it and he's like, okay, well, uh, we can get away with butterfly bandages. It doesn't look like the bone has been injured itself. I don't remember getting an X-ray. I think he came to that conclusion because he could see that it wasn't injured, and I probably would have been in a lot more pain if it had been. Uh, it's at this point, by the way, that now my hand is starting to throb. Um, and I'm more aware of the pain than I had been. I had described for you that feeling of like a vice. That vice was that metaphorical vice. I still felt that, and it's not that got tighter or harder or whatever in my imagination, but it was rather the entire finger just started to throb. It started to say to me, it was getting warmer, and it was saying, "Pay attention to me. I'm not feeling very good." Anyway, he put butterfly bandage or something on it, and then he wrapped it up in gauze and all this after making sure everything was clean and everything looked fine. And he said, "Look, this should heal, but you know, you're gonna have to not get this wet for a little while, and all this. When you shower, you're gonna want to hold the hand over your head and blah blah blah." So I had all of these instructions on how I was supposed to take care of myself. I'm sure they must have given me Tylenol or whatever the equivalent of the day was. I had not yet been introduced to the wonders of ibuprofen. That was a revelation. I first started taking ibuprofen when I was in college, and it was a wonder drug in terms of making headaches go away that Tylenol just couldn't do for me at that time. This is not an ad for pharmaceuticals. I'm just saying. But and it got me patched up, and then feeling a little less lightheaded. But as I say, my hands throbbing a little bit. But the Tylenol is starting to work. And talking with Cindy some more on the drive back, and the windows are rolled down because it's an older car, and it was a nice, pleasant evening. So it was nice to get a nice, cool breeze in the car. This was near the beginning of the school year, and it was still generally warm. And and we're talking about our homework and all that. Well, then we get there. We get back to the dorm, and I realize I still have to write my paper. And this adventure must have it absolutely ate at least a couple of hours of the evening. I think she decided to go off to bed or whatever. I ended up being one of maybe two people in the lounge once I got everything set up in the lounge. But I had to write this paper. This paper was due the next morning, and I had to get it done. So I'm typing, and by the way, I was actually a relatively fast typist. I had taken keyboarding class when I was in high school. It was actually taught as a class because my high school still taught a track for uh, people who would become secretaries when they graduated from high school. It was one of the trades that was taught. I had to get special permission to take this keyboarding class. I took it because I knew I was studying computers, and I knew I was going to have to type in order to write code. Um, but I was the only freshman when I was in high school. I was the only freshman taking typing because that was saved for the upper class students. And I was also one of the only boys taking typing, and gender roles at the time being what they were. Um, that's just the way that was. Well, I wasn't typing so fast now because my middle finger is just bandaged up, and uh, and it hurt to apply direct pressure to it. So now I'm typing fully with one hand and then hunting and pecking with the other. Eventually, I was just hunting and pecking with my index fingers for both hands. But my finger is throbbing. I'm distracted. I'm tired, and as you get more tired, you get more raw. The Your thinking becomes a little slower, and it requires a little bit more effort to complete the dots, and then so it took me longer to write this paper than it might have if I had not had this little escapade. But I finally get the paper done, and at this point, I think it might have been 4 a.m. I remember the number 4, so I'm going to go with 4 a.m. It was either that or it was 4 hours before I had to get up. I had never, I staying up until 4 a.m. was not something I had done very often up until this time, and I had certainly not done it when I had to get up very early the next morning. But here we were. So I go to bed completely beat, completely exhausted, set my alarm. Somehow I manage to wake up when the alarm goes off and drag my sorry butt to take my shower and to get dressed and get ready to go to class. The campus of the university was very, very hilly, and the buildings were spread out very, very far. And I was on what they called the North Campus. It was the newer set of dorms, and we were further away from the campus. That might have been a blessing because the West Campus dorms, while they were closer to everything, they were also at the bottom of a very steep hill. We didn't have as steep a hill from where we were. But I was in the building that was furthest away from campus from the central campus in the North Campus. Walk on over and show up to class after having printed on my dot matrix printer my 3-page paper, wishing I had more time to read through it when my head is more clear, because my head is not clear after getting so little sleep. My hand at this point, it wasn't throbbing so much in the morning. It just kind of hurt if I bumped into anything, but otherwise it was just a dull ache, kind of a dull throbbing. And I get to the classroom where I need to turn in the paper, and there is a sign taped to the door. And our section, our TA, our teaching assistant, who was running the class, he had other matters he had to attend to, and he was going to miss that class. You can turn in your papers on Wednesday. And I'm standing there in front of the door, and I'm thinking, on the one hand, I'm kind of glad I have an extra day. I can get through today. I can sleep, and then tomorrow's Tuesday. I'll have a cleaner, cooler, clearer head, and I'll be able to read over this, make sure that my essay's in good shape. So that's good news. And on the other hand, I got up so early, and I had to take a shower and just drag myself across the campus, and my head was just full of cobwebs, and I really didn't know whether to be happy or displeased, or, man, all that work for something that then ends up I had a couple more days. In the end, I decided I felt sleepy. So my next class was still 4 hours away. Um, uh, it's just the way my schedule worked. Didn't have another class until I don't know what time it would have been, 1:15 p.m. or something like that. But anyway, I I trudge on back to my room and I collapsed for a few hours and felt a little better when I was done. But it was something that I marveled at when all was said and done, that uh, Cindy just knew. She just, something needed to be done, and she stepped up and she took care of it. It would have been very easy for any of my fellow students to say, "Oh, but I've got my own paper that's due whenever. I've got my own stuff that's going on." I know she had her own stuff that's going on. We had talked about it while we were driving, but she got me to the hospital. She made sure that I was taken care of, and then she got me back, and uh, and she asked about it, later. And I realized over time she had that sort of instinct with everybody. She might have even referred to herself at some point as like the floor mama bear or something like that at some point later on. But when she had said it, it was like, yep, that's exactly right. Um, and yeah, and it was something that I always associated with her from that point on, was among her many other qualities as a very smart and active member of our class, was just this instinct to take care of people, make sure that they were tended to. Um, uh, and as I say, later on, I discovered I did the same thing. I just never thought of it. It never dawned on me that I was doing the same thing until after many years, and realizing, oh yeah, I'm pretty good in a crisis myself, but in a different way. She had a maternal instinct that manifested itself in a different sort of expression. It was much more nurturing in her case, um, and I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah, but it was something that I had observed. It was something uh, that I uh, learned from. I did not type very fast for a long time. My typing speed had been 108 words per minute before this had happened. I was training at the radio station. I was training to do news because it was a commercial radio station, but it was also a training station, and they would take students and teach them how to do the different jobs. So this was how I learned to do radio news. And we had IBM Selectric typewriters. And man, if you could type fast, you could make those things sing. But I was reduced to doing hunt and peck for a long time. And even by the time I had the ability to actually press down on the keys on the typewriter with the injured finger, um, I didn't get my typing speed back up for years. And it's funny just how things go. But my hand healed, and my finger is still whole, and it still has that indentation where it had once been nearly severed. And it's just kind of funny how things work out. But when you're trying to convey, trying to get into somebody's head in the hopes of bringing them into your experience, it's those visceral details. And so I throw that out as an example. And I hope you found this story at least a little bit entertaining. You never know how things are going to work out when you're a freshman and you're away from your parents and you have an opportunity to make all of these wonderful mistakes. I can't even remember if I told my parents right away that I had nearly severed my fingertip right off. But I'm sure I told them at some point. But anyway, thanks for checking out another entry in the INRIS Files. And until next time, keep your mind open and your thinking sharp. Take care.